You're listening to JACKmix, our Artist Talk series. I'm Dominic Benosun, Executive Director at Jack. Here, we slow down. We listen to the artists who move through our space, to the neighbors who remind us why we make. Each voice you hear is shaping what's next on our stage and in our world. So, settle in. Let's begin.
Hello, welcome back. This is Artist Talks at Jack. Today we're with our resident artist in the JACKLab, Camille Simone Thomas. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
It's so good to see you.
It's good to be seen.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're gonna start with a question that I always start with just to ground us in who you are. I wanna know who you are, what you make, and why you make it.
Well, my name is Camille Simone Thomas. I am a playwright primarily right now, educator. I do a little research sometimes, producer, sometimes occasional performer. I make art. I tell stories. That's what I do.
Okay. Camille, one of the most important things, and I already see it on your chain, you have that D from Detroit.
Aww.
You know, you always self-identify as a 5th generation Detroiter and a 1st generation Jamaican. How do you feel like these things are important, and how do you feel like you carry those lineages? And also, I know, very, very like compressed question, but how do you feel like these roots show up in your storytelling, particularly in your newest play, Sweet Blood?
Yes, well, I always tell people I'm a 5th generation Detroiter on my dad's side. He's African American, because as Black folks, we oftentimes cannot go that far back in our lineage. And I am just a product of all of the people who have come before me. And I'm very blessed to be able to, on both my father's African American side and my mother's Jamaican side, be able to go back a good 5, 6 generations, because I brought my books too. I have family historians. I just count this as more history work. Like, this is one of my older cousins, and she did this research, and like, that's me, my mom, my grandpa, great-grandpa, great-great-great, like, it goes back. And all of it is just here in this book. And so I'm very proud of my people and where I come from. And I just see the work that I do as a continuation of that. It's not necessarily always personal family histories, but it is histories of the places my people are from. And sometimes it is family histories as well, just depending on the play that I am writing.
And I guess, do you feel like your work is constantly in conversation with those ancestors and with that lineage?
100%. In conversation with my ancestors. I mean, there are plays that I have not written yet that are like percolating, that are in conversation in different ways. One of the plays, I mean, it could come out as something completely different by the time it comes out, but I guess I'll talk about it now. It's looking at, Detroit was one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad before freedom in Canada. So it's looking at people, they're not my direct ancestors that I know of, but who escaped from slavery to get to freedom in Canada, using a little bit of like Christianity, using like, all right, how are we going to exodus from this place that we are in into somewhere new? And I'm a long line of Christians too. Everybody, church, 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 church. Love that. And in Sweet Blood, it's more a history of resistance happening, more violent resistance instead of escaping.
I just think that's so powerful. Just to let our audience in a little bit too, Sweet Blood is this very lovely play that Camille has been working on in her lab with us for the last like almost year, which is so incredible. Sweet Blood is set in Jamaica in 1727 and follows 3 Afro-Taino Maroon sisters navigating survival and revolution. In that vein, what drew you to this specific time and place, and why did it feel so urgent to bring this story to the stage now?
Yeah, so I was inspired to write this play from my grandparents' ancestral home in Jamaica. I was doing some research. I have never been there. My grandparents were forced to sell the home. But as I was doing research, we have pictures, you know?
Yeah.
And I found out that the home used to be a coffee plantation. And I was like, there's something here. So thinking about coffee plantation, thinking about the work that I do writing like women's stories, Black women's stories. And also I was pre-diabetic at the time. So I was just thinking a lot about sugar. And one of my mentors was like, oh, that's just epigenetics. You know, our ancestors were up there eating sugar cane and like now we all got diabetes. And I was like, I don't know how true that is for real. I don't know the science there. But I was like, oh, I know I want to write about women who may have existed on this plantation. I wanted to write more about revolution and revolt and resistance, more so than women who were currently enslaved. And Jamaica has a long, long history with the Maroon people of fighting against slavery and using violence to fight against slavery. And then 1728 was when the first documented like Maroon War started. But wars don't just start. There are many skirmishes, there are many fights, there are many, you know, resistances. And I was like, what if I just wrote about a resistance that could have possibly happened with these women who maybe came from this plantation? Yeah, and that's how this all started in my head.
Oh my goodness. I think one of the other big threads that comes through for me that I think is so interesting is that linkage between resistance and spirituality and how deeply enmeshed those things are, and how like a revolution happens in your spirit.
Yes, it does.
Way
Yes, it
before,
does.
you know, it begins to like actually manifest. And one of the most striking elements of the play that I absolutely adore is the cane spirit,
Yes.
which like moves between this unseen and seen world. And I want to ask you how you feel like spirituality and ancestral presence in your work plays a role, and how it specifically plays a role in Sweet Blood.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said a revolution starts in your spirit before it manifests and actualizes in your physical presence. How does it fit into my work? I know the way God speaks to me and the difficult things that God might ask me to do as a Christian. And I'm like, okay, dramaturgically, these women would not have been Christian. It just doesn't make sense for them to be. But I understand the connection to something bigger than myself, the calling to step outside of who and where I am right now into doing something that might terrify me, that might frighten me, that might put my physical presence in an unsafe place. And I mean that because I'm trying to articulate myself in a way that's not too long, but like that gets to the point.
Please.
Yeah, because Sweet Blood is a violent resistance. The women are in a place that might harm them, but they came from slavery. They came from oppression. Their father was a slave in this play. So they had violence enacted upon them. So they need to use violence to resist again.
I mean, I just continue to think about resistance.
Yes.
The way you keep talking about it and the way that it shows up in your work, just as a theme, period. I feel like all of your plays show such a resistance of spirit, such a resistance in terms of like what you have your characters do at large. I feel like you're always interrogating colonialism, capitalism, white supremacy, and like Sweet Blood just shows at the root resistance in so many forms, from fighting to like healing and sisterhood. And I'm really curious over your writing process, what new insights about freedom and survival started to emerge for you as you wrote the piece?
I don't think they were necessarily new insights, but just things that continue to be built upon. It's gonna take all of us. Like, it's not just one person leading the revolution. We all need to be working in our specific lanes, fighting as hard as we can fight in order to get free. Whether your lane is on the front lines leading a protest, or your lane is in the classroom educating students, as our histories are very much being stripped from us right now as we are watching. Teach the children, please. So it's really, I think and every time I read this play with another group of people, they always offer a new insight or a new avenue or way into freedom for them. And I'm like, yes, let's put that in our fighting toolkit, our freedom toolkit, our joy toolkit, because we're gonna need all of this.
Camille, it's always so good.
I'm doing good. I'm doing a good job.
I think also to kind of pivot a little bit, one of the most beautiful things that I love about this lab is that it is a place for you to experiment and like very early on, as opposed to a lot of like labs or incubators that exist in this industry to create work, there's normally this really big expectation to like present and like show. But what's so beautiful about this is you get so much time to kind of like be in the work and like not need to feel that like pressure to create something for an audience. And I'm really curious, as you've been continuing to develop the script, because it's been a long year, I'm just really curious if you could just share more about what your creative process has been in general, but also on this particular play. And one of the other really great things, like I have to shout out Camille and like be a shameless plug. She is such a dramaturg in her work. There's such a dramaturgical and like historical research perspective that she brings. She also had a wonderful, it was a residency?
Yes.
A residency.
At the Folger.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
DC.
The girl is researching. The girl is writing academic papers.
It's with my bachelor's degree. I'm trying my best.
No, she is doing. And I think that like, I'm just so curious on how that folds into your creative process. How do you balance doing so much historical research, spiritual intuition, and also like theatrical experimentation? Your plays move in such interesting ways. So I'm just curious to hear more about like, what is that process?
Yeah, I like research. I like reading. I'm just a nerd, honestly. I brought another book to show everyone. We Refuse, A Forceful History of Black Resistance by Kelly Carter Jackson. So, I mean, I just have ideas, and I'm like, I cannot be the first person to have this idea, and I am not. There are so many scholars and women and activists and people who have written so much more intensely and who have the masters, PhDs, all of the things, and I'm like, what are they talking about? So I researched their words and what they're saying. I did not know Saidiya Hartman's critical fabulation was what I was doing until an academic was like, oh, my best friend, she finished her doctorate. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Brianna Escamilla, she's a doctor now. Yeah. But she was listening to me yap about my project. And she was like, oh, you should read Saidiya Hartman's, goodness gracious, Venus in Two Acts. Yeah. And that's where she first starts talking about critical fabulation, which is sort of examining the archive for the voices that are missing. So I was like, this woman is smart. I need to know more.
Can you talk more about that? That's the first time I'm even hearing that term.
Can I talk more about it? Well, the way I understand it is just examining the written archives that we have access to, as far as like, when I was at the Folger, I was able to look at like some first primary documents of these journals that slaveholders wrote. And I promise you, it broke my brain, because there were so many parts where I was reading where they were like, all right, get the slaves, put them in the ship, and then I would turn the page and they'd be like, put it upside down, put it sideways, put it left, put it right. And I was like, I thought we were talking about people. And then I would go back and I'd be like, okay, they said slaves, and then they're talking about furniture. Like, I literally could not comprehend the way that slaveholders talked about people, humans, like they were furniture, just shoved them in here. And I was like, their voices are not heard. You know, their agency was taken from them. What might these people have wanted to say or to express or to share, to cry about, you know? And so that is how I understand critical fabulation, exploring the archives for what is not recorded. Because why would they give us pen and paper? Why would they let us tell our stories, you know?
That has sat me straight down. I hope you know that. Wow, my mind is just so blown at that particular way of creating. There's something so intimate about being willing to like dig into the history and go where it isn't, like shedding light on these things that people are not talking about in that way in those documents. And like, wow, like my spirit is just so shaken that like, that's so much a part of your process. I'm also loving all the books. Can you,
Yes,
can you do a quick
I brought
little
one
book
more
tour?
book. I did. This is my great aunt, Blossom O'Mealy Nelson. She does many things, but in the later half of her life, she was a poet and is still a poet. And so there is poetry in my play as well. And like I said, I just take all of the things that I do as a continuation of the people who came before me, the family members who came before me. I am a poet because Dr. Blossom O'Mealy Nelson is a poet. I am a historian because Jean Wanless Henry is a historian. So that's what I strive to put into my work. I hope I'm making my people proud. That is it. That is it.
You are. I mean, it's just so incredible the ways in which you're beginning to continue to just expand the canon and the history. I think often we forget that the things that we're doing right now will be very soon a history. We're living in historic times. And I think that the fact that your plays are so deeply grounded in what is, what was, and what will come to be, it's just so powerful. I want to kind of also continue to dive into, because I think you just gave us such a beautiful like bridge to it. You are a playwright, but beyond that, you're an educator, you're a facilitator, you are constantly working with young people through different, many different avenues, partnerships. And I would love to know how your role as an artist, a dramaturg, a historian, a poet, an educator inform one another in your process at large.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of my biggest purposes in the world is to encourage people to live their best and biggest lives. And I think I cannot encourage others to do what needs to be done, to take up as much space, to let their light shine if I am not also doing that myself. And some of the people who need to let their light shine the most are the students, are children who are seen as less than, or who are seen as, oh, they don't know anything. They're just 15, they're just 12, they're just 10. And I'm like, no, they have thoughts. They may not have fully formed thoughts, and sometimes I love kids, they crack me up. But they are discovering the world, and they are seeing the world, hopefully most of the times, as it should be, or as they desire it to be. So I just try to kick down the doors and let my students say what they need to say what they want to say, investigate their thoughts a little deeper, show them how I am investigating work, how I am also in the classroom, but producing this play in November. Also, teaching somewhere, facilitating a workshop, and still reading. I can be a student and a teacher. I can be a playwright and a producer. Like, there is so much more that we can be. And I think all of my roles influence that.
I love that. I have another question.
Please, I like questions.
What role do you see your work playing in community healing and Black female liberation?
Yes. I hope it inspires people to get curious, to throw away the rule book. Like I said, I have a bachelor's degree. I don't have a master's. I did not go to nobody's fancy school. So I really hope it teaches women, Black women, people, do what you want, write what you want. If you have the little crazy thought of like, what if I explored this ancestral line? What if I saw a picture and wanted to write a play about it? What if I put poetry and lighting and a spirit and some dancers? And I mean, we don't have a budget for the dancers right now, but in the next version of this play, there might be dancers. We will pay them well. And also, it's okay if you don't have everything right now. Like, this production is gonna happen, this developmental production is gonna happen in November. And I already am like, all right, we have X amount of money to do this with. Good. But then when we have the, I don't want to say multi-million, because that's like a lot. I don't want to make anything like excessive and I don't know. But when we have the bigger budget to pay the people what they deserve to be paid, then do it again. Just start where you are and make the art that needs to be made.
I could end it right there. I'm not going to.
Let's keep it going.
But I could end it right there.
Yes.
I think that that's such a word.
Yeah.
Once again, I want to give you your flowers and let so much of our community into the fact that Camille is a doer, a mover, and a shaker. She is someone who has the vision and makes it plain and walks it out in, I think, such a beautiful way. Truly, not only a writer, but also a producer of her work. She is really living out and has been living out prior to even this residency, that mission. That is how we came to get to know Camille.
And BAC, that's how I met you.
Yes,
Yeah.
and just like in the world, always producing her own work, always just like going for the thing, no matter what the resources may or may not be. And I think that there's something not only just courageous, but inspirational in doing that. And I think one of the questions that I always want to ask our artists, because I find that our artists are some of the most bold and experimental and radical in their thought and approach in New York. It is always our wrap-up question, and it is a little surprise.
Okay.
I want to know what your dream for the American theater cultural institutions are. What do you want our future to be?
I just want to pay the people well, a living wage, luxurious wage to, like, when I say living wage, healthcare is the minimum, okay? Being able to afford your groceries is the minimum. Being able to get on the bus is the minimum. I want our people to be able to live a little bit better than that, okay? Because I get upset. I was an actor once upon a time, and I stopped being an actor because I was going to auditions and I couldn't afford my rent, and I was like, I have to hustle to make it happen. But like, to go to an audition, I have to take off from work. To take off from work, that means I don't get paid. And at that time, I worked at Manhattan Theater Club. I was an intern, and I was working in their education department. And so they had a program, a summer theater program, and we fed all of the students in the summer theater program lunch. That was my lunch. I was like, if I don't go to work today, then I don't get lunch and I don't get paid. That means I won't be able to pay rent. That means, I'm gonna have to leave New York. And so now I'm yelling. I get so upset. I should yell. We should be upset. Anyway. And so that's really one of the reasons why I started writing and started producing, because I can write anywhere. I could write at work, just a few minutes here, a few minutes there. And that's when I was like, oh, well, I guess I have this play. My first show was a one-woman show, and that's when I thought people were gonna produce it. I thought everybody was gonna be like, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. Someone get her on the Broadway. I am not on the Broadway. You know me, Key. I'm just silly and I have a lot of thoughts.
No, you're good.
All of this to say, I would like the American theater to pay people what they deserve to be paid, in order to live a life that is sustainable. That's what I want. For now.
And you heard it here first. For now.
For now.
The very last thing we'll do, is there anything that you want us to shameless plug before we get out of here?
My show happening in November. Yeah, 6th through the 8th.
Come on.
That's real exciting. Look up other artists too. Go see their work. That's what I got for you.
All right. Well, you guys have heard it here first. Thank you for sitting down with us, Camille. We really appreciate it. And as always, catch us on the next one.
Thank you for joining us on JACKmix. There's more to come. More voices, more stories, more light. If you felt something, don't just listen. Come be a part of it. Step into our theater. Sit amongst the laughter, the silence, the sparks of inspiration. Find out what's next at jackny.org and follow us at JackArtsNY to stay close. Until next time, thank you for being in the mix.